Thank you for joining us for our Sunday School lesson for January 29, 2023. Today's lesson is entitled, God Promises His Presence. God Promises His Presence. In this lesson, we're going to look at the book of Joel, chapter 2, verses 21 through 27. That's the book of Joel, chapter 2, verses 21 through 27. And we're going to see the presence of the Lord among the children of Israel. But before we go into that, I want you to think about this. The fact that God has promised to always be present. He's always promised to be part of us. And we can go back to the very beginning of creation in Genesis, where it said He breathed into us the breath of life, and man became a living being or a living spirit. Even our very being is because God lives in us, and He'll never leave us. Matthew 28 verse 20 tells us where He makes the promise, lo, I'll be with you always, even until the end of time. And we know with Him there is no end of time, because the gift of God is everlasting life. We see that the promise of God remains the same, because He tells us, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. So as we look at this lesson, we're going to see how even in times where we may be being punished or corrected, and we may feel like the Lord is far away, He's still always nearby. So let's get into our scripture lesson for the Sunday school this morning. And it's from Joel chapter 2, verses 21 to 27. And it reads, Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things. Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring. For the tree beareth her fruits, the fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for He hath given you the former rain moderately, and He will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the fats shall overflow with wine and honey. And I will restore to you the years the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you. And ye shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, that He hath dealt wondrously with you, and any people shall never be ashamed. And ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and none else, and my people shall never be ashamed. Now here we see that these verses pick up around verse 21. But just so you'll have an idea of what was going on in the background, we both know, or we all know, that Israel was always sometimes obedient, sometimes disobedient. So sometimes they were in bondage, sometimes they were free. They'd make promises to follow the Lord, and then at other times they'd start to follow after gods or doing the ways of the people that they were surrounded by. Even though He'd often told them, don't mix with strange people, don't take on their ways, don't worship their idols, and don't partake in their rituals. But we know from the history that Israel often strayed away from the word. And sometimes in punishing them, the Lord would sort of curse their land in a sense. And there were times when He would punish them with a drought, and everything would dry up. Other times He would send locusts and animals or something among the people to destroy the crops, which would lead to famine. So in today's lesson, we see here the Lord is drawing the people back to Him. So He told them, Fear not, O land, but rejoice. The Lord will do great things. He's telling His children, I know you've gone through a time of need. I know you've gone through a time of lack. And even though the punishment was just, I still love you. And I love you enough. And I don't want to see you suffer. So this undying love that He has for us, He reaches out. And in this case to the Israelites. And He said, I don't want you laboring in fear. So He said, don't be afraid. But because of their disobedience, they'd gone through so much. They were praying and praying. God did hear their prayers. Even the land, it said in 22nd, He had to tell the land and the beast to not be afraid, because He was still the God of all creation. because during a drought or during a famine, sometimes there's not even enough food for animals. And everything that should bear fruit or bear life was not bearing fruit or life. So everything was struggling to eat and to live. But God was speaking to all of creation. He said, I have the strength and I'm going to do wondrous things. I'm going to restore what was taken away from you. So he told them, be glad, children of Zion. He said, rejoice because your God sees and hears your cry. And he said that the rain that had been withheld, that he was going to give them not only the latter rain, but he was going to increase the rain so that they would not be thirsty. They would not be in a starving land. And we know that when the rain falls, the crops will grow. Life springs back up. So even though we talk about rainy days, and we've had a lot of them lately, rain is the source of life in a sense. You need water in order to survive. So he said, I'm going to give you the latter rain that I withheld, and I'm going to give you rain now. And he says that way you won't have to worry about not having food. You won't have to worry about not having water. He said all things would thrive. He means the animals, they would be fattened because they would have food to eat. He said you'll overflow with wine and with oil. So he was making this country rich again just because he loved them so. And see, when we hear the term day of the Lord, oftentimes we think of something in the future, but normally it's tied in with the word of judgment. And this is what they've been going through. He also promised them in the 25th verse that he would restore to them the years that the locusts had eaten up, and the cankerworms and the caterpillars. See, all these palmer worms and all of these things attack the crop. And when they attacked the crop, they would leave the fields totally barren because they would eat up everything. But he told them that they would eat in plenty again. And he said that he would satisfy them and that they should give him all the praise because he is the God that can be and do all things for them. And he says that they were his people and he didn't want them to be ashamed of him as their God. And when they testify to others, this is why when we talk about testify to the goodness of the Lord, don't just dwell on the things that have happened that to you appeared bad. He said, when I bless you, when I come to your rescue, when I restore you, testify, testify to the glory of my majesty, testify to the glory of my power. And then he went on in 26 and said that they would not only eat in plenty, they would be satisfied, that they should praise his name. And then he says, don't ever be ashamed. And he won't be ashamed of them as his people. And in verse 27, it said, and ye shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God. Now, in this verse, he lets them know that he's never forgotten them. He's telling his chosen people, the children of Israel, I'm in the midst of you, regardless of what you're going through. You know, the Psalm says that even if you fly to the heights in heaven, he said he was there. And if you go to the depths of the pits of hell, he said he's still there because he's still there looking over us, seeking to save us, ever reaching for us. All we need to do is look up, and reach out to the Lord. And then he told them that none else but God, he himself, could ever make the people proud and make them know that he is truly all powerful and that he's the true and living God. And that verse reminded us again, never be ashamed of what you believe. Never be ashamed of your God. So keep all that in mind as you see that God has always promised to be with us. He said it in the beginning and he's saying it in the end. So no matter what state you're in, no matter what condition you find yourself in, know that God is the true and living God. See you next week.